Welcome back to another Beyond Clean Expert series. You're listening to the Chemical Safety Expert series with Alex Hilliker. I'm your host, Bobby Parker, and on today's episode, we are asking the question, what happened to ETO? That's the question of the day, Alex. Looking at the chemicals that we use in today's sterile processing department, just they're not the same ones that we hear about from the 80s. And obviously the most notable example of that is ethylene oxide sterilization. So I'll pitch that question to you, Alex. What happened to ETO?
Sure, it's a great question, Bobby. We mentioned in the last episode when we were talking about the update to AMI ST58 that ST41, which was the standard for ethylene oxide, was superseded by ST58. And so, to your point, what happened over the past couple of decades that really drove ETO out of hospitals, and why did hydrogen peroxide gain so much popularity?
Right.
Most viewers may not know that ethylene oxide was, and in many ways really still is, the gold standard for sterilization, not just in the United States, but around the world. And in fact, ethylene oxide is still used today to sterilize more than half of all medical devices in the United States. That's 20 billion medical devices a year, with a B, 20 billion each and every year.
That's inclusive of the single use, like Band-Aids and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason for this use of ETO is that it's an excellent sterilant. It is very, very effective at destroying microorganisms, and in particular, it's useful for medical devices because it penetrates very, very deeply into the product. It can get to those hard to reach areas, and it also has high material compatibility, so it can be used with a wide range of products. That also allows medical devices to be sterilized in their final packaging in bulk by the pallet in very large sterilization chambers. So we're talking about a very, very effective sterilant that can do something like that with the effectiveness that it does. However, ETO does have a few problems. First, it's a known human carcinogen, which means that it's known to cause cancers in people, such as lymphomas and breast cancers. It's also known to cause reproductive harm if you're overexposed to it. And interestingly, the latest science actually suggests that ETO may even be more toxic than previously thought at low concentrations. And so the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is actually working to reduce the permissible exposure limit over the next 10 years to 1/10 of the current level, taking it from 1 part per million down to 0.1 part per million. So,
Right, and that reduction means you can be exposed to even less in a permissible way, like more hazardous than we thought.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the hospital setting, going back to this question of what happened, ETO was being used really everywhere since about the 1950s. But there was this risk that was posed to staff because of two things. One, potential leaks from the sterilizer itself or the storage cabinets where ETO canisters were being housed, but also from the off-gassing from the product and the packaging. So because ETO is that effective penetrant, and that's part of the reason it works so well, it also takes a long time to come back out of the product. And because of that long aeration time, sterilization cycles actually took a very long time to complete, especially when you look at today's standards. So with ETO, sometimes sterilization cycles could take 8, 10, even 12 hours. I mean, can you imagine that in your modern day SPD?
Dr. Smith's not waiting for that state. Yeah.
So the 1990s come along, the early 1990s, advanced sterilization products, ASP, introduced their STERAD 100, which used hydrogen peroxide gas plasma for low temperature sterilization. In short, Bobby, this was a game changer. Less safety risk, easier implementation, and critically, faster cycle times, which means more throughput for the department, more efficiency. What used to take 10 hours with ETO in the 90s now takes less than 30 minutes. That's a huge advancement for sterile processing departments in terms of turning over products that are being used in surgeries and procedures throughout the hospital. So
For sure.
when you think about that, that's a key driver for what ultimately led to hydrogen peroxide being the sterilant of choice in hospitals today.
Yeah, that low barrier to installation. Even from a utility standpoint, right? A lot
Yeah,
of times you just have to figure out the electrical, and then you plug that cabinet in wherever you have space, and you don't have to worry as much about the venting considerations and
right.
everything that you'd have with a big ETO sterilizer. So that makes sense. There are still some of the SPDs out there using ETO, but by and large, everybody's switched to that hydrogen peroxide. The other chemical that I wanted to ask about that seems to have been sunsetted in a similar way was glutaraldehyde. You know, we've got OPA, peracetic acid, all these others, but you don't see a lot of glutaraldehyde still in facilities. Did it go through a similar kind of story?
Very similar, eerily similar, actually, Bobby. You'll see a lot of parallels in what I lay out here. So, glutaraldehyde, for those again newer to the industry, glutaraldehyde was the disinfectant of choice for hospitals from the 1960s until the 80s and 90s. Glutaraldehyde, cold soak disinfectant that also has a sterility claim if you let the device soak long enough. But here's the problem: the vapors from glutaraldehyde are toxic. So again, this is a very strong disinfectant that we're talking about. So overexposure can cause irritation to the eyes, the skin, and the respiratory tract. It's also something that's known as a sensitizer, and a sensitizer is a chemical that you can actually trigger a more severe response with prolonged exposure. So the more you're around it, you can actually have a bigger reaction. All of these factors together led to a lot more scrutiny, and it led to glutaraldehyde being banned in some countries like the UK, for example. So, interestingly enough, similar to ethylene oxide, the process for disinfection with glutaraldehyde also took a long time, which creates exposure hazards to staff because you're soaking endoscopes and open bins full of glutaraldehyde. Doesn't sound
Right,
great, right?
right, right.
So in the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, the first automated endoscope reprocessors appeared on the market, AERs for short. They typically use a chemical called peracetic acid, or PAA, as you mentioned. So critically, these machines reduce the manual labor time, increase safety, and then similar to vaporized hydrogen peroxide, decrease those cycle times. So tremendous advancement for the industry. And then really just to summarize the key points across both of these examples, Bobby, decreased cycle time, decreased health impacts and safety considerations, and advances in technology all really led to where we are today with the chemicals and concentrations that we're using. But as we'll discuss moving forward, these changes in the chemicals and the changes in the processes, all a very, very good thing. But does it really eliminate the risks and the need for chemical safety considerations? That's something that we will be talking about here over the next few episodes.
Well, that is the question to answer. This isn't your mom's sterile processing department anymore. There's not surgeons smoking cigarettes while performing surgeries and the things that we like to joke about. We're not doing open soak glutaraldehyde high level disinfection anymore. But are there still risks? And I'm sure you're going to uncover a lot of that for us in our upcoming episodes. But that's going to do it for this installment of the Beyond Clean Expert series. If you have more questions about this topic or about chemical safety in general, I'd encourage you to reach out to Alex. You can find his contact information in the video description below. If you've been enjoying this series or just kind of catching us midstream, you can find the full series over at beyondclean.net. Stay tuned for the next episode next month and each month. And until we talk to you next time, keep fighting dirty.